Dominic Russo meticulously adjusted the specialized vacuum system he designed, ensuring it captured every particle of dust from the mansion's antique Persian rug. At 43, he was in peak physical condition, a stark contrast to most men his age who had resigned themselves to growing soft in office chairs. "Perfect work as always, Mr. Russo," commended Wesley Thornton, the third richest man in Boston. "That rug is from the 1700s, and I don't trust anyone else to touch it." Dominic nodded respectfully. "Thank you, sir. I appreciate your trust. You know, I've been meaning to ask, why cleaning? A man with your background could do anything." A small smile played at the corner of Dominic's mouth. Few knew that Russo's Elite Cleaning Services wasn't just a cleaning company. It was his perfect cover, a business that granted him access to the homes, offices, and secrets of Boston's most powerful people. "I find it therapeutic," he answered simply. "After 15 years in special operations, I prefer the straightforward nature of making things clean." What Dominic didn't mention was that his company handled far more than dust. His team of former military specialists provided discreet security assessments, bug sweeps, and intelligence gathering for clients who could afford absolute discretion. The cleaning aspect was real, and they were exceptional at it, but it was merely the visible tip of a sophisticated operation. As Dominic loaded equipment into his unmarked van, his phone buzzed with a text from his wife, Natalie. "Don't forget the Parker fundraiser tonight. We're the Armani I bought you. Important people will be there." He sighed. After 12 years of marriage, Natalie had transformed from the supportive woman who'd waded through his deployments into someone obsessed with status and connections. Her recent promotion to VP of Marketing at Blue Star Industries had only accelerated the change. At home, a spacious colonial in a prestigious neighborhood that Dominic had paid for entirely, he found the suite laid out with a note. "Please try to sound impressive when you talk to my colleagues." The implied shame in her words stung, but he had bigger concerns. For 3 months, Dominic had been gathering evidence of her affair with Brad Sullivan, Blue Star's director of operations. Their indiscretion might have gone unnoticed by most husbands, but Dominic wasn't most husbands. "You heading to Natalie's thing tonight?" asked Maddox Walsh, Dominic's right-hand man and former Delta Force teammate, calling from their operations center. "Yeah. You find anything new?" "Hotel records confirm it. They've been meeting at the Fairmont every Tuesday and Thursday. Always the same suite. Always booked under a company expense account." Dominic's jaw tightened. "And that offshore account? Growing steadily. Looks like Sullivan's been skimming from corporate accounts and sharing the proceeds. Your wife's getting a cut of whatever they're doing. Send everything to Mason. I want it all documented properly." Mason Blake wasn't just Dominic's lawyer. He was the most feared litigator in New England and owed Dominic his life after an incident in Dubai neither man ever discussed. After hanging up, Dominic showered and dressed, studying his reflection. The Armani suit fit his athletic frame perfectly, but he knew Natalie would still find something to criticize. He slipped an expensive watch onto his wrist, not the one Natalie had given him, but one from his former commander, General Reynolds, who now served on Blue Star Industries' board of directors. A detail Natalie didn't know, one of many. As he adjusted his tie, Dominic thought about how differently things might have gone if Natalie had simply been honest. He could forgive many things, but betrayal and disrespect weren't among them. He slipped his phone into his pocket, containing all the evidence he needed to destroy both Natalie and Brad Sullivan. But patience was a virtue the military had taught him well. Tonight was Natalie's moment. He would let her have it. The real show would come later. Chapter 2. Paper Trails and Whispers. The Blue Star Industries' annual charity gala gleamed with wealth and power. Situated in the grand ballroom of the Windsor Hotel, crystal chandeliers reflected off polished marble floors as Boston's elite mingled over champagne and carefully crafted canapes. Dominic watched from the periphery as Natalie worked the room, her burgundy dress catching the light as she laughed and charmed. She was undeniably good at this part of her job, the networking, the politics, the performance. "She's quite something," came a voice beside him. Dominic turned to find Patricia Dunham, Blue Star's chief financial officer, studying him with sharp eyes. "She certainly is," Dominic replied neutrally. "You must be proud." Her tone suggested a question rather than a statement. "I appreciate excellence in all its forms." Patricia smiled knowingly. "You know, when I learned what you do for a living, I was curious. Then I made some calls. Dominic raised an eyebrow, but remained silent. A friend at the Pentagon speaks very highly of you. Operation Blackwater Ridge. Few civilians knew that name. Dominic carefully studied Patricia's face. That operation is classified. Not to those of us on certain defense contractor boards. She sipped her champagne. I'm simply saying I know the difference between a job title and a person's true worth. Before he could respond, Dominic spotted Brad Sullivan approach Natalie, their fingers briefly touching during a handoff of a drink. A gesture intimate enough to notice, but casual enough to dismiss. Patricia followed his gaze. Sullivan's been making some interesting financial moves lately. As CFO, I noticed such things. She handed Dominic her card with a number handwritten on the back. This is my private line. When you're ready to discuss certain inconsistencies, call me. As she walked away, Dominic pocketed the card, pieces falling into place. Patricia suspected something about Brad and Natalie's financial activities, but needed proof. Proof Dominic already possessed. There you are. Natalie's voice interrupted his thoughts. Why are you hiding in the corner? Albert Chambers wanted to meet you, and I couldn't find you. I've been right here, Dominic replied evenly. Well, try to be more visible. And please don't mention the cleaning business tonight. Just say you run a service company if anyone asks. Her voice dropped to a whisper. People like Albert don't need to know the details. And what details would those be, Natalie? His quiet tone carried a dangerous undercurrent. She missed it entirely. You know what I mean. Just try to fit in for once. She squeezed his arm with artificial affection before turning back toward the crowd. Dominic checked his watch. The same moment his phone vibrated with a text from Maddox. Package secured from target location. Contents confirm everything. He knew what this meant. While Natalie was at the gala, Maddox had retrieved documents from the secret apartment she and Brad kept for their meetings. Meetings that weren't just romantic, but conspiratorial. Another text arrived, this one from an unlisted number he recognized as General Reynolds. Position approved by the board. Announcement next week. Everything proceeding as discussed. Dominic allowed himself a small smile. While Natalie thought he was merely embarrassing her with his cleaning business, he had been setting the stage for something she couldn't possibly imagine. Later that night, he watched as Natalie kicked off her heels in their bedroom, buzzing with excitement. The CEO practically promised me the executive vice president position, she gushed. Can you believe it? 2 more promotions in less than 18 months. Impressive, Dominic replied. You and Brad must make quite the team. Her movements stuttered slightly. Brad, we work together sometimes, but this was all me. Of course, Dominic conceded, noting how quickly she'd become defensive. You've always been exceptional. She studied him for a moment, perhaps searching for sarcasm, but his face revealed nothing. I have that conference in Chicago next weekend, she said, changing the subject. I'll be gone Thursday through Sunday. Dominic nodded, already knowing she and Brad had booked a luxury suite under a corporate account. There was no conference. I'll be fine here, he assured her. I have a big job at the Monroe estate that weekend anyway. As Natalie prepared for bed, typing furiously on her phone with a small smile that wasn't meant for him, Dominic slipped downstairs to his home office. The room was secured with a biometric lock that only he could access, a precaution Natalie had once found paranoid but had eventually accepted as one of his military quirks. Inside, he unlocked a hidden safe and added Patricia's card to a growing file. The evidence was mounting. Bank statements showing parallel deposits to offshore accounts, hotel receipts, photographs taken by his surveillance team, and recordings of conversations that revealed not just an affair, but a sophisticated scheme to manipulate stock options and company contracts. Patience, he reminded himself. All the pieces were almost in position. When he finally made his move, there would be no recovery for either of them. He closed the file, thinking of the moment at the gala when Natalie had introduced him to the CEO, Carson Phillips. This is my husband, Dominic, she'd said with perfectly disguised resignation. He runs a service company. Phillips had shaken his hand firmly, a knowing look in his eyes. Ah, Mr. Russo. I've heard quite a bit about your operations. Very impressive. The momentary confusion on Natalie's face had been subtle but unmistakable. It was the first crack in her carefully constructed narrative, and Dominic knew there would soon be many more. Chapter 3. The Invitation. The Monroe estate sprawled across 3 acres of prime real estate overlooking the Atlantic. As Dominic supervised his team's cleaning of the 15,000 square foot main house, he received an unexpected call. "Mr. Russo, it's Carson Phillips." Dominic stepped onto the oceanfront terrace for privacy. "Mr. Phillips, what can I do for you?" "I'd like to discuss an opportunity. Are you available for dinner tonight at the Capitol Grill, 7 o'clock? "I'll be there," Dominic confirmed, his mind already calculating the implications. Hours later, seated in a private dining room with Blue Star's CEO, Dominic listened carefully as Phillips outlined his proposal. "Our head of corporate security is retiring next month," Phillips explained. "The board and I would like you to take his place." Dominic maintained a neutral expression. "That's an interesting offer, especially considering my wife's position at Blue Star." Phillips smiled thinly. "That's precisely why we waited to approach you. We needed to be certain of various factors first." He slid a folder across the table. "This contains information about certain activities within the company that concern us. Your background makes you uniquely qualified to address these issues." Inside the folder were surveillance photos of Brad Sullivan meeting with representatives from Blue Star's main competitor, along with financial records showing suspicious patterns, all information Dominic already possessed. "General Reynolds speaks very highly of your capabilities," Phillips continued. "He suggested you might have already noticed certain irregularities." Dominic closed the folder. "I'm aware of the situation. I thought you might be." Phillips leaned forward. "The board has authorized me to offer you complete autonomy in restructuring the security division. Your first task would be to conduct a thorough investigation into potential corporate espionage and financial improprieties. And my wife's position in all this will be determined by the evidence," Phillips stated flatly. "Blue Star doesn't tolerate betrayal, Mr. Russo. Neither does the U.S. government, which has significant contracts with us." Dominic considered the offer. It aligned perfectly with his own plans for revenge, providing him with institutional authority to complement his private resources. "When would you announce this appointment?" "Next Friday, at Natalie's promotion party." Philip's eyes held a hint of cold amusement. "We find the symmetry appropriate, given the circumstances." Dominic nodded slowly. "I accept your offer, but with one condition: no one knows until the announcement. Not the current security team, not human resources, and especially not my wife." "Agreed." Phillips extended his hand. "Welcome to Blue Star, Mr. Russo. I suspect many people are about to discover they've severely underestimated you." That night, as Natalie packed for her fictitious Chicago conference, Dominic made preparations of his own. He contacted Mason Blake to finalize the divorce papers, transferred additional evidence to secure servers, and arranged for continued surveillance of Brad and Natalie during their weekend tryst. "Everything's in place," Maddox confirmed during their encrypted call. "We've got eyes and ears on them from the moment they leave Boston." "Good," Dominic replied. "And the Sullivan situation?" "Our contact at the SEC is building the case. They'll be ready to move when you give the word." After ending the call, Dominic found Natalie in their bedroom, holding up 2 dresses. "Which do you think for the keynote speech?" she asked, seemingly seeking his opinion for the first time in months. "The blue one," he answered, knowing it was the dress she'd worn the first time she'd met Brad for drinks after work, a detail from his surveillance reports. "You're right," she smiled, a rare moment of warmth. "You've always had good taste." For a fleeting second, Dominic remembered the woman he'd fallen in love with, ambitious but kind, determined but honest. That woman was long gone, replaced by someone who saw him as an inconvenient accessory to her crafted image. "Natalie," he said quietly, "are you happy?" The question seemed to startle her. "What? Of course I am. Things are going perfectly." She busied herself with her suitcase, avoiding his eyes. "The promotion party next week is going to change everything. Carson says he has a major announcement planned." "Yes," Dominic agreed, watching her carefully. "I believe it will change everything." She misinterpreted his tone as supportive, flashing him a brilliant smile. "I knew you'd understand eventually. Once I'm executive VP, we can finally move in the circles we deserve. No more hiding what you do for a living." The irony of her statement wasn't lost on him. Soon, there would be no more hiding what either of them did for a living. As she continued packing, Dominic received a text from Patricia Dunham. "Files you requested are ready." Board vote was unanimous. Sullivan doesn't stand a chance. Everything was converging exactly as planned. The promotion party would be Natalie's crowning achievement, right before it became the scene of her greatest humiliation. Dominic watched his wife hum happily as she prepared to spend the weekend with her lover, oblivious to the fact that her carefully constructed world was about to crumble beneath her feet. The cleaner was about to do what he did best: remove every trace of the mess they'd made. Chapter 4: The Reckoning. The grand ballroom of the Windsor Hotel had been transformed for Natalie's promotion celebration. Crystal champagne flutes caught the light from overhead chandeliers, while tasteful blue and silver decorations, Blue Star's corporate colors, adorned the tables. A stage with the company logo dominated one end of the room, where Carson Phillips would soon make his announcements. Dominic arrived precisely 30 minutes after the event began, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that even Natalie would approve of. He moved through the crowd with easy confidence, accepting congratulations from those who recognized him as Natalie's husband, while keeping her in his peripheral vision. She stood near the bar with Brad Sullivan, their body language revealing their relationship to anyone trained to notice such things. When Brad's hand lingered too long on her lower back, Dominic merely smiled to himself. Every touch, every secret glance was being photographed by two members of his team positioned strategically around the room. Dominic. Patricia Dunham approached, champagne in hand. Perfect timing. Carson is about to begin the presentations. As if on cue, the CEO stepped onto the stage, tapping a microphone to gain everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate excellence at Blue Star Industries. Philip's voice commanded attention. We're here to recognize one of our rising stars, a woman whose dedication and vision have helped propel Blue Star to new heights. Please join me in congratulating our newest Executive Vice President of Marketing, Natalie Russo. Applause filled the room as Natalie, radiant in a silver evening gown, made her way to the stage. Dominic clapped politely, noting how she scanned the crowd, likely looking for him. Their eyes met briefly as she took her place at the podium. Thank you all so much, she began, her composure perfect. This promotion is the culmination of years of hard work and determination. She launched into a practiced speech about dedication and teamwork, pausing when she spotted Dominic moving closer to the stage. I'd like to especially thank my team for their support, she continued, deliberately avoiding mention of her husband. Success is never achieved alone, and I've been fortunate to work with the very best at Blue Star. Her gaze flickered to Brad, who raised his glass slightly in acknowledgement. Dominic positioned himself directly in her line of sight, his expression neutral but unwavering. For the first time that evening, a hint of uncertainty crossed her features. As I take on this new role, Natalie pushed forward, I pledge to continue driving innovation and growth for our company. The future of Blue Star has never been brighter. The applause that followed was genuine. Whatever her personal failings, Natalie was undeniably skilled at her job. She soaked in the adulation for a moment before Carson Phillips stepped forward again. Exceptional words from an exceptional executive, he praised. And Natalie is right. Blue Star's future is indeed bright, particularly because of another announcement I'm privileged to make tonight. Natalie moved to step away, but Phillips gestured for her to remain on stage. Confusion flickered across her face. Security and integrity are the foundations of any successful enterprise, Phillips continued, which is why the board and I are thrilled to announce the appointment of our new head of corporate security and compliance, a man whose background in military intelligence and private security operations makes him uniquely qualified to protect Blue Star's interests. Dominic began moving toward the stage, his path deliberate and unhurried. Many of you may know him already, Phillips said, his eyes finding Dominic in the crowd. Though perhaps not as well as you thought. Natalie's expression shifted from confusion to dawning horror as she tracked Phillips' gaze to her husband. Please join me in welcoming Dominic Russo to the Blue Star executive team. The room erupted in applause as Dominic ascended the steps to the stage. Brad Sullivan's champagne glass froze halfway to his lips, his face draining of color. Thank you, Carson. Dominic spoke into the microphone, his deep voice steady. I'm honored to accept this position and the responsibilities that come with it. He turned slightly toward Natalie, whose composure was visibly cracking. As my wife just noted, success is never achieved alone. I've been fortunate to observe Blue Star's operations closely over the years, which gives me a unique perspective on the challenges ahead. The deliberate emphasis on observe wasn't lost on Natalie, whose knuckles had turned white around her clutch purse. My first priority will be a comprehensive security audit of all departments. Dominic continued smoothly, with particular attention to data protection, financial compliance, and the safeguarding of intellectual property. Brad Sullivan abruptly set down his glass and began moving toward the exit, only to find his path blocked by Maddox Walsh and another member of Dominic's team, both now openly wearing Blue Star security badges. I look forward to working closely with each department, Dominic concluded, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on Brad's now frozen figure. Beginning immediately. As Phillips wrapped up the formal presentations, the crowd broke into groups of excited conversation. Dominic stepped away from the microphone, turning to face his wife. Surprised, he asked quietly, "What the hell is this?" Natalie hissed, maintaining her smile for anyone watching. "You accepted a job at my company without telling me? Just as you accepted Brad Sullivan into our marriage without telling me," he replied, his voice calm but cold. "We both appear to have our secrets." The color drained from her face. "I don't know what you're." The Fairmont Hotel, Suite 1620. Every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 7 months. Dominic's eyes were unforgiving. "Your Chicago conference, last weekend at the Peninsula, room 842, registered under Blue Star's corporate account. You've been spying on me?" Anger flashed through her shock. "I've been cleaning up messes for a long time, Natalie. Yours was particularly transparent." He glanced across the room to where Maddox now stood beside Brad, speaking in low tones that had the younger man looking increasingly panicked. "This is insane," she whispered furiously. "You can't just—" "Ms. Russo," Patricia Dunham interrupted, approaching with determined steps. "I need a word with you about some financial discrepancies my team has uncovered, specifically regarding the offshore account linked to your personal email." Natalie's eyes widened. "What are you talking about? What account?" "The same one that received transfers correlating exactly with Brad Sullivan's meetings with Northstar Technologies' development team," Patricia stated flatly. "We have the complete transaction history. Mr. Phillips would like to see you in the hotel's conference room." Immediately, as Patricia led a shell-shocked Natalie away, Dominic caught sight of General Reynolds watching from across the room, offering an approving nod. Everything was unfolding exactly as planned. When Dominic checked his phone, he found a message from Mason Blake. "Divorce papers filed as instructed. Property division executed per your directives. House security codes changed. Her access to all accounts terminated." By midnight, Natalie would return home to find herself locked out of the house she'd once dismissed as paid for by cleaning money. By morning, she would discover herself suspended from the job she'd just been promoted to, pending a full investigation into corporate espionage and financial fraud. And by week's end, she would understand exactly who her husband had always been. Not the simple cleaning business owner she'd belittled, but the man whose skills had earned him the respect of generals, CEOs, and government officials. The man who never forgave betrayal. The cleaner who left no traces behind. Chapter 5, Counterattack. 3 days after the promotion party, Natalie sat in a sterile conference room at Blue Star headquarters, surrounded by lawyers she could barely afford. Across the table, Patricia Dunham laid out damning evidence. Emails, financial records, and surveillance photos documenting her affair with Brad Sullivan and their meetings with Blue Star's competitors. "These allegations are preposterous," Natalie insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. "This is clearly my husband's attempt to discredit me after learning about—" She stopped herself. "About your affair?" Patricia finished for her. "The affair is the least of the company's concerns, Ms. Russo. The corporate espionage and financial fraud, however, could result in federal charges." Natalie's lawyer leaned forward. "My client admits to poor judgment in her personal life, but categorically denies any illegal activities. These financial records could easily have been fabricated by her husband, who clearly has both motive and the technical capability." Patricia smiled thinly. "A reasonable defense strategy. However, the SEC has independently verified the offshore accounts, and federal agents are currently examining Mr. Sullivan's devices and financial records." She slid a document across the table. "This is from the Department of Justice. They've opened a formal investigation." As Natalie's world collapsed around her at Blue Star, Brad Sullivan was facing his own reckoning. Dominic had arranged a meeting in his new office, the same office Brad had once hoped to occupy as Natalie's executive partner once they'd successfully executed their plan. "Please, sit down." Dominic gestured to the chair across from his desk. Brad remained standing, sweat beading at his hairline despite the cool temperature. "This is a witch hunt," Brad declared, trying to project confidence. "You fabricated everything because you're jealous of your wife's success and my relationship with her." Dominic regarded him calmly. "That would be a compelling narrative, if not for the evidence collected by federal authorities, independent of my involvement." He opened a laptop and turned it to face Brad. "This is footage from Northstar Technologies' security system, showing you accessing their R&D lab after hours on 6 separate occasions." The color drained from Brad's face. "How did you get that?" "I didn't. The FBI did, after an anonymous tip led them to investigate industrial espionage involving Blue Star's proprietary technology." Dominic closed the laptop. "The question isn't whether you'll be convicted, Mr. Sullivan. It's how many years you'll serve." Brad collapsed into the chair, his bravado evaporating. "Natalie planned everything," he blurted. "She approached me with the scheme. She had the contacts at Northstar. I was just following her lead." Dominic smiled coldly. "I know exactly who initiated what. I've been watching you both for months." He leaned forward. "But here's what you don't understand. I don't care which of you was the mastermind. You both betrayed my trust. You both will pay the price." "What do you want?" Brad's voice cracked. "Money? I can get you money." "I want nothing from you," Dominic replied, standing to signal the meeting's end. "The federal prosecutors, however, will want a full confession and testimony against all co-conspirators. I suggest you cooperate fully. It might reduce your sentence from 20 years to 10. As Brad was escorted out by security, Dominic received a text from Mason Blake. "Judge granted the emergency motion. All assets frozen pending investigation. She can't touch anything." Meanwhile, Natalie had retreated to the only place left available to her, a modest hotel room paid for with her one remaining credit card. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she furiously typed on her laptop, attempting to gather ammunition against Dominic. "Who are you really?" she muttered, searching his name through various databases. Most returned nothing beyond his cleaning business registration. But a deep search through military contractor records revealed fragments, redacted mission reports with his name barely visible, commendations for operations that officially never happened, and connections to high-level government officials. Her phone rang, an unknown number. "Hello," she answered warily. "Ms. Russo, this is Agent Wilson with the FBI. We need you to come to our field office tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for questioning regarding potential violations of the Economic Espionage Act." After the call ended, Natalie threw the phone across the room in frustration. Somehow, in just 3 days, she had lost everything: her job, her reputation, her lover, her home, and her financial security. Her phone pinged with a message from a block number. "Meeting. Tonight. 8 p.m. Harborview Park. Come alone. I can help you destroy him." Desperate for any leverage, Natalie arrived at the deserted park that evening, scanning the darkness nervously. A figure emerged from the shadows, a woman Natalie recognized as Lindsay Patel, an administrative assistant from Blue Star's legal department. "What do you know about my husband?" Natalie demanded. Lindsay glanced around nervously. "Not here. They might be watching." She handed Natalie a flash drive. "Everything is on this: his real military record, the operations he ran in Eastern Europe, the people who disappeared after crossing his path." "Why are you helping me?" "Because he ruined my brother's life," Lindsay hissed. "Thomas Patel. Your husband had him convicted of espionage 5 years ago." Natalie clutched the drive. "This will be enough to expose him?" "More than enough. But be careful who you share it with. These are powerful people." As Lindsay melted back into the shadows, Natalie felt hope for the first time in days. She rushed back to her hotel room, plugged in the drive, and began scanning the documents: mission reports, surveillance photos, and detailed accounts of Dominic's covert operations. She immediately forwarded everything to her lawyer with a triumphant message: "Use this to discredit him. Show he fabricated evidence against me using his military connections." What Natalie didn't know was that Lindsay Patel wasn't just an administrative assistant. She was one of Dominic's most trusted operatives, and the flash drive contained carefully crafted disinformation mixed with just enough verifiable truth to be convincing. When Natalie's lawyer submitted these documents to the court the next day, attempting to portray Dominic as a rogue operative with a vendetta, he walked straight into the trap. Government representatives immediately challenged the documents as classified information obtained illegally, opening a new investigation into how Natalie had acquired them. By that evening, Natalie found herself facing additional charges of attempting to disseminate classified information. Her lawyer withdrew from the case, unwilling to risk his career on a client who had provided him with stolen government documents. As Natalie sat alone in her hotel room, surrounded by the ruins of her life, her phone rang again. This time, it was Dominic. "You always underestimated me," he said quietly when she answered. "From the moment you decided I was beneath you because I just clean houses." "Is that what this is about?" she asked bitterly. "Your wounded pride?" "No, Natalie. This is about consequences. About the price of betrayal." His voice remained calm, which somehow made it more terrifying. "You chose to cheat, to steal, to sell company secrets. Each was your decision. I simply ensured you couldn't escape the results." "You set me up," she accused. "That woman in the park. Lindsay? One of my best operatives. The classified documents you so eagerly distributed were created specifically for you to find. Every move you've made has been anticipated and countered." Tears of frustrated rage spilled down Natalie's cheeks. "What happens now?" "Now," Dominic replied, "you face the world you've created for yourself. Without the money, status, or connections you valued above loyalty and honesty. Without the husband you dismissed as merely the cleaning man." The line went dead, leaving Natalie alone with the devastating realization that she had never truly known the man she married, and now she would pay the full price for that fatal mistake. Chapter 6: Collateral Damage. The fallout from Natalie and Brad's downfall rippled through Boston's corporate community. News of their industrial espionage scheme dominated business headlines, while their affair became fodder for society gossip. In contrast, Dominic's appointment as head of corporate security received positive coverage, with several articles noting his distinguished but classified military background and his impressive private sector achievements. At Blue Star headquarters, Dominic moved methodically through his agenda, implementing security protocols and conducting department audits. To most employees, he appeared calm and professional, a stark contrast to the chaos surrounding his wife's disgrace. In his expansive new office, Dominic reviewed security footage when Patricia Dunham entered without knocking. "The Sullivan situation is contained," she announced, closing the door behind her. "He's accepted a plea deal, 15 years with possibility of parole after 10, in exchange for full testimony against Natalie and the North Star executives." Dominic nodded, unsurprised. "And the offshore accounts?" "Frozen by federal authorities. The money will eventually be returned to Blue Star, minus whatever the government claims for fines." Patricia studied him carefully. "You predicted every move they would make, didn't you? Even Lindsay's approach to Natalie with those fabricated documents." "People become predictable when desperate," Dominic replied simply. "Especially those who believe themselves cleverer than they actually are." Patricia took a seat across from him. "Carson is impressed with how cleanly you've handled everything. The board is too. They're already talking about expanding your role to include all risk management operations. I appreciate their confidence. There is one complication," Patricia said, sliding a tablet across the desk. On the screen was an email from Alexandra Sullivan, Brad's wife. "She's requesting a meeting with you. Says she has information about additional conspirators." Dominic considered this unexpected development. Alexandra Sullivan was a respected pediatric surgeon who had remained conspicuously silent throughout the scandal. Unlike Natalie, she had maintained her dignity, filing for divorce quietly and keeping her 2 teenage children out of the public eye. "Schedule it for tomorrow," he decided, "and have Maddox vet her thoroughly before she arrives." The next morning, Alexandra Sullivan entered Dominic's office with poise that belied her circumstances. At 45, she carried herself with quiet confidence, her medical credentials evidenced by the hospital ID still clipped to her purse. "Dr. Sullivan." Dominic greeted her, rising from his desk. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Russo," she acknowledged, taking the offered seat. "I appreciate you agreeing to meet. This isn't easy for me. I understand. Your situation is unenviable." Alexandra smiled tightly. "That's putting it mildly. My husband's infidelity and crimes have devastated my family. My children can barely show their faces at school. I'm sorry they're suffering for their father's choices, Dominic said sincerely. No child deserves that. She studied him for a moment. You're not what I expected. Few people see beyond the surface, Dr. Sullivan. It's a common failing. Please, call me Alexandra. She opened her bag and removed a USB drive. 3 months ago, I found evidence of Brad's affair with your wife. Instead of confronting him immediately, I decided to understand what I was dealing with. I installed monitoring software on our home computer. Dominic raised an eyebrow, reassessing the woman before him. What I discovered went far beyond the affair, she continued. There were others involved in their scheme. People whose names haven't yet surfaced in the investigation. She placed the drive on his desk. This contains everything. Emails, financial records, recorded conversations. I've made no copies, and I've told no one else. Dominic didn't reach for the drive. Why bring this to me instead of the FBI? Alexandra met his gaze directly. Because you understand retribution in a way law enforcement doesn't. Because you've executed your revenge with surgical precision, which I respect as a surgeon myself. She leaned forward slightly. And because I want the same thing you do. Complete justice, not just the partial kind that satisfies legal requirements. For the first time in weeks, Dominic found himself genuinely surprised. What do you want in exchange for this information? Protection for my children. They've lost their father to prison and their social standing to scandal. I don't want them to lose their future opportunities as well. Dominic considered her request. I can ensure they're not tainted by association. Blue Star has considerable influence with university admissions boards and medical residency programs. And one more thing, Alexandra added. I want to know if you suspected my involvement. Dominic's expression remained carefully neutral. Should I have? She smiled sadly. No. Despite appearances, I truly knew nothing until I found the evidence. I love my husband. I believed in our life together. Her composure cracked slightly. 15 years of marriage, and I never saw his betrayal coming until it was too late. In that moment, Dominic recognized something in Alexandra that resonated with his own experience. The shock of discovering that the person who shared your life was a stranger, the determination to maintain dignity while everything collapsed, and the cold resolve that followed heartbreak. Sometimes the people closest to us are the most difficult to see clearly, he acknowledged. You have my word that your children will be protected. He finally took the drive. And the information you've provided will be put to appropriate use. After Alexandra left, Dominic immediately had the drive's contents analyzed by his security team. The information proved explosive, revealing that Martin Reynolds, a senior vice president at Blue Star and close friend of Carson Phillips, had been the original architect of the espionage scheme. Reynolds had recruited Brad, who had then involved Natalie after their affair began. Within hours, Dominic had briefed Carson Phillips and initiated a covert operation to gather additional evidence against Reynolds. By evening, federal agents were escorting the stunned executive from Blue Star's offices in handcuffs, while news crews captured footage that would lead every business report the next day. That night, as Dominic worked late in his office, he received an unexpected visitor, General Reynolds, his former commander and Blue Star board member. Impressive work, the general said, settling into a chair without invitation. Martin Reynolds was my second cousin, you know. I was aware, Dominic replied evenly. Yet you didn't hesitate. Betrayal is betrayal, regardless of connections. The general nodded thoughtfully. That's why I recommended you for this position. Blue Star needed someone who understood that principle absolutely. He studied Dominic with shrewd eyes. Have you considered what comes next? After your revenge is complete. Justice isn't revenge, General. It's restoration of balance. Semantics, Dominic. The question remains, what will you build from these ruins? Before Dominic could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from Maddox, urgent. And attempting access to property. Appears intoxicated. Police en route. Excuse me, General. A situation requires my attention. Dominic rose from his desk. Their conversation clearly concluded. Of course. The general stood as well. But consider my question, Dominic. Men like us don't merely survive chaos. We create new order from it. You've torn down what was corrupt. Now decide what you'll raise in its place. As the general departed, Dominic contacted the security team at his home, instructing them to ensure Natalie wasn't physically harmed, but to allow the police to handle the situation according to protocol. No special treatment, No intervention. Meanwhile, across town, Alexandra Sullivan sat with her children in their considerably downsized apartment, watching the news coverage of Martin Reynolds' arrest. Her daughter looked up from her homework. "Mom, will things ever be normal again?" Alexandra thought of her meeting with Dominic, of the calculated intelligence behind his eyes and the absolute conviction in his actions. She thought of the choice she had made to align herself with his brand of justice. "Not normal as we knew it," she answered honestly, "but perhaps something stronger in the end." As police officers escorted a disheveled Natalie from the property she once called home, as Brad Sullivan settled into his first night in federal detention, as Martin Reynolds faced the destruction of his career and reputation, Dominic Russo stood at his office window overlooking Boston's skyline, contemplating the general's question. What would he build from these ruins? The answer was already forming. A future where betrayal held consequences, where justice was inexorable, and where he would never again be underestimated. A future cleansed of everything and everyone who had betrayed him. Chapter 7. Desperate Measures. 6 weeks after her public downfall, Natalie sat across from her third lawyer in as many months, the fluorescent lights of the prison consultation room highlighting her haggard appearance. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup, replaced by a standard-issue jumpsuit and dark circles under her eyes. "The prosecution has amended the charges," her lawyer explained, shuffling through documents. "They're now including violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act based on new evidence from the North Star investigation." "What does that mean for my case?" Natalie asked, her voice hoarse. "It means the potential sentence has increased to 25 years if you're convicted on all counts." The lawyer leaned forward. "Ms. Russo, they have overwhelming evidence. Your best option remains a plea deal." Natalie stared at the scarred tabletop. "And if I testify against everyone involved, including Martin Reynolds?" "The prosecutor might reduce the charges to 15 years with possibility of parole after 8. The reality of her situation crashed down on Natalie with crushing force. From executive vice president to federal inmate in less than 2 months. From luxury homes and first-class travel to a 6x8 cell with a toilet in the corner. All because she had underestimated the man she'd dismissed as just a cleaner. "There has to be another way," she insisted, desperation edging her voice. "What about my cooperation with other investigations? Surely that's worth something." The lawyer looked uncomfortable. "The problem, Ms. Russo, is that your husband has already provided authorities with most of the information you might offer. Your leverage is minimal." "Dominic," she spat the name. "He orchestrated all of this. He trapped me. From the evidence I've reviewed, Ms. Russo, he merely documented the choices you made independently." The lawyer gathered his papers. "I'll continue negotiating with the prosecution, but you should prepare yourself for a significant sentence." After her lawyer departed, Natalie was escorted back to her cell, her mind racing with increasingly desperate schemes. There had to be something, some piece of information, some leverage she could use against Dominic. That night, she approached Veronica Diaz, a former accountant imprisoned for embezzlement who had connections to several organized crime families through her previous clients. "I need a message delivered," Natalie whispered during the exercise period. "To someone on the outside who might be interested in information about Dominic Russo." Veronica eyed her skeptically. "What kind of information?" "The kind that powerful people would pay to have," Natalie replied vaguely. "About his military operations, his current security contracts, his methods." "And you have this information? Enough to be dangerous to him. Enough to be valuable to the right people." Veronica considered the request. "My contacts don't work for free. What are you offering?" Natalie leaned closer. "I have access to offshore accounts that the authorities haven't found. Significant amounts, untraceable." It was a desperate lie, but Natalie was beyond caring about consequences. She needed leverage, and quickly. 3 days later, Veronica slipped Natalie a note during lunch. Message delivered. Response coming. Meanwhile, across the city, Dominic was settling into his expanded role at Blue Star. The board had appointed him Chief Risk Officer, with oversight of security, compliance, and strategic planning. His office now occupied the corner suite once destined for Natalie, with views of Boston Harbor that stretched to the horizon. His phone buzzed with a message from an encrypted source, one of his deep-cover contacts in federal law enforcement. Subject: and attempting to establish outside communications through inmate Diaz. claims to have compromising information, attempting to make contact with Zubkov's syndicate. Dominic's expression remained unchanged as he processed this information. The Zubkov syndicate was a Russian criminal organization with significant cyber operations, exactly the kind of entity that might value intelligence on his past military operations or current security protocols. He typed a brief response. Monitor, but do not interfere. Identify all contact points. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Alexandra Sullivan entered, looking considerably more composed than at their first meeting. Her new position as Blue Star's Director of Health Services, a role Dominic had created specifically for her, suited her professional background and provided the financial stability her family needed. The Executive Health Program proposal is ready for your review, she announced, placing a folder on his desk. And the board approved the Scholarship Foundation for children affected by corporate fraud. Excellent work, Dominic acknowledged. How are your children adjusting? A genuine smile softened her features. Better. Thomas was accepted to the summer program at MIT, and Emma's therapy sessions are showing progress. She hesitated before adding, "We're grateful for your support, Dominic." He nodded, accepting her thanks without comment. Their professional relationship had evolved into a cautious alliance built on mutual respect and shared experiences of betrayal. Neither discussed the personal aspects of their situations, maintaining a careful boundary between their professional interactions and their parallel paths of recovery. "There's something else," Alexandra said, her expression growing serious. "I received a strange call yesterday from someone claiming to represent friends of Natalie. They suggested they had information that would interest someone in my position." Dominic's eyes narrowed slightly. "What exactly did they say?" "That they could provide evidence that you fabricated the case against Brad and Natalie, that you used your military connections to plant evidence." She met his gaze directly. "I hung up immediately and reported the call to your security team, as per protocol." "You did the right thing," Dominic assured her. "It's a desperate attempt from a desperate woman." After Alexandra departed, Dominic contacted Maddox. "Natalie's making moves from inside," he explained, attempting to connect with Zubkov while also reaching out to Alexandra. "Accelerate the final phase." "You sure?" Maddox questioned. "Once we start, there's no pulling back." "I'm sure," Dominic confirmed. It ends now. That evening, as Natalie returned to her cell after dinner, she found a new cellmate waiting, a hard-faced woman with tattoos visible above her collar. "Irina." The woman introduced herself with a thick Russian accent. "I have message from Viktor Zubkov. He is interested in your information about Dominic Russo." Natalie's heart raced with vindication. "When can we arrange a proper meeting?" Irina smiled coldly. "No meeting. You tell me information, I pass to Victor. If valuable, your commissary account receives funds." "That's not how this works," Natalie objected. "I need guarantees. Protection. This is guarantee." Irina showed her a small phone, smuggled into the prison somehow. "You speak directly to Victor's representative." Desperate and seeing no alternatives, Natalie took the phone when offered. The voice that answered was distorted by some kind of filter. "Ms. Russo, I understand you have information about Dominic Russo that might interest certain parties." "I do," Natalie confirmed, keeping her voice low. "Information about his military operations, his current security protocols, and his intelligence network." "Very interesting. But why should we believe you have access to such sensitive information?" Natalie had prepared for this question. "Because I was married to him for 12 years. Because I know where he keeps his secure files and how to access them. And because I'm willing to testify to anything you need to destroy him." The voice was silent for a moment. "We will need verification of your claims." "Of course," Natalie agreed quickly. "I can provide details about Operation Blackwater Ridge, a classified mission in Eastern Europe that Dominic led. I can describe the extraction of a high-value asset from Belarus in 2016. I can. That's enough for now." The voice interrupted. "You've provided sufficient proof of your motivation. My associate will remain your cellmate for the time being. Further instructions will come through her." The call ended abruptly, leaving Natalie with a surge of hope. Finally, she had found leverage, a way to fight back against Dominic's systematic destruction of her life. What she couldn't know was that Irina was actually Sofia Petrov, one of Dominic's most trusted operatives, deliberately placed in Natalie's cell through his law enforcement contacts. The phone call had been with Maddox, using voice distortion technology. Every word Natalie had spoken, every offer to betray national security, every willingness to commit treason had been recorded and was already being transmitted to federal prosecutors. By morning, Natalie would face new charges of attempted espionage and conspiracy to commit treason, charges that carried potential life sentences with no possibility of parole. The cleaner was completing his work, ensuring that not a trace of the mess remained. And in his spotless new office, Dominic Russo reviewed the transcript of Natalie's conversation, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction as the final pieces of his revenge fell perfectly into place. Chapter 8. The Final Sweep. The headline dominated the Boston Globe's front page. Corporate espionage scandal widens. Former executive faces treason charges. Beneath it, Natalie's mugshot stared back at readers, a stark contrast to the polished corporate portrait that had accompanied articles about her promotion just months earlier. In the federal courthouse, Dominic sat in the back row of the gallery, observing as Natalie was led in wearing handcuffs and an orange jumpsuit. The prosecution had called this emergency hearing to present the new evidence and additional charges. She hadn't seen him yet, her gaze fixed on her increasingly desperate-looking attorney. "Your Honor," the federal prosecutor addressed the judge, "the government has obtained incontrovertible evidence that the defendant, Natalie Russo, attempted to sell classified national security information to representatives of a foreign criminal organization. We are therefore adding charges of attempted espionage under the Espionage Act, Section 794, and conspiracy to commit treason." Natalie's attorney rose shakily. "Your Honor, my client categorically denies these absurd allegations. We demand to see this supposed evidence immediately." The prosecutor presented a file to the judge. The evidence includes recorded conversations between the defendant and an undercover operative, Your Honor. In these recordings, Ms. Russo explicitly offers to reveal classified details about military operations in exchange for assistance against her husband. The judge reviewed the documents with a deepening frown. "These are extremely serious allegations, Counselor. The court will review this evidence immediately." As Natalie turned to scan the courtroom, her eyes finally locked with Dominic's. For a moment, understanding dawned on her face, the realization that she had walked directly into another of his carefully laid traps. Her expression morphed from shock to hatred, her mouth forming words he could easily read. "I'll kill you." Dominic simply held her gaze, his face impassive, before standing and quietly exiting the courtroom. In the corridor, he found Alexandra Sullivan waiting, dressed in a conservative suit appropriate for her new executive position. "Is it done?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Dominic confirmed. "The new charges ensure she'll never be free again." Alexandra nodded, her expression somber rather than triumphant. "I testified this morning about Brad's involvement. The prosecutor says my statement was compelling and decisive." They walked together toward the exit, an unlikely alliance forged through shared betrayal. "The Children's Trust Fund has been established," Dominic informed her, "completely separate from any assets that might be seized in the ongoing investigations. Their educational and living expenses are secured." "Thank you," Alexander said simply. "You didn't have to do that." "I promised to protect them," Dominic reminded her. "I keep my promises." Outside the courthouse, they parted ways without further conversation, each understanding that their connection, while powerful, was built on mutual pain rather than friendship. Some bridges couldn't be rebuilt once burned. They could only be replaced with different structures entirely. Back at Blue Star headquarters, Dominic found Carson Phillips waiting in his office. "I just heard about the new charges against your wife," the CEO said without preamble. "Treason. That's extreme." "She made her choices," Dominic replied evenly, taking his seat behind the desk. "I merely ensured they had appropriate consequences." Phillips studied him with a mixture of admiration and wariness. "The board is impressed with how thoroughly you've cleaned house. Security breaches down 90%, operational efficiency up, and the stock price recovering nicely after the initial scandal. I do what I'm hired to do." "Yes, you certainly do." Phillips leaned forward. "Which is why we want to discuss expanding your role permanently. Chief Operations Officer, with oversight of all divisions." Dominic raised an eyebrow. "That's a significant promotion." "It's a recognition of exceptional capability," Phillips countered. "And frankly, after seeing how you handled this situation, Most of the executive team is too terrified to oppose anything you suggest. A ghost of a smile crossed Dominic's face. Fear is an inefficient management tool long-term. Perhaps, but respect born from demonstrated competence is not. Phillips stood to leave. The formal offer will come through tomorrow. I hope you'll accept. After the CEO departed, Dominic turned to his computer, reviewing the final reports from his various operatives. Brad Sullivan had been transferred to a maximum security federal prison to begin serving his 18-year sentence. Martin Reynolds had accepted a plea deal that would keep him incarcerated for at least a decade. The North Star executives implicated in the scheme faced their own legal battles, their company's stock plummeting as investors fled. And Natalie, the woman who had once looked at him with love before betraying everything they'd built together, would spend the rest of her life in a federal facility, her name synonymous with corporate fraud and treason. The systematic destruction was complete. Every person who had participated in betraying him had been methodically removed, their lives dismantled with the same precision Dominic brought to every operation. Yet as he sat in his immaculate office, surrounded by the trappings of his newfound corporate power, Dominic felt a curious emptiness. The satisfaction of revenge had been real but fleeting, a momentary rush that faded quicker than expected. His phone rang. General Reynolds. I heard about the additional charges against your wife, the general said when Dominic answered. Elegant work. Thank you. You've completed your mission with typical thoroughness, the general continued. The question now is what comes next. Dominic looked out at the Boston skyline, considering the question. I've been offered COO, a significant step up, but is that really what you want? Corporate politics and quarterly earnings reports. What's the alternative? The general chuckled. There's a situation developing overseas that requires your particular skill set. A cleaning operation on a much larger scale than corporate espionage. Interested? Before Dominic could respond, his secure line blinked with an incoming call from Maddox. I should take this, he told the general. I'll consider your offer. Don't take too long, the general advised before hanging up. Men like us don't thrive in peace for long. Dominic switched to the secure line. What is it, Maddox? We have a problem, his deputy reported. Natalie managed to get a message out before the new charges were filed. To your son. Dominic froze. His son, Michael, had been estranged for years after choosing to live with Dominic's first wife following their divorce. The boy, now a 27-year-old man, had barely spoken to his father in over a decade. What was the message? A manipulated version of events, claiming you fabricated everything, that she's innocent. According to our sources, he's hired a private investigator to look into the case. Dominic absorbed this information with cold calculation. Where is he now? Boston. Checked into the Marriott downtown this morning. Maintain surveillance, but don't engage, Dominic instructed. I'll handle this personally. After ending the call, Dominic sat motionless, contemplating this unexpected development. Michael's interference was an unforeseen complication, a loose thread in what should have been a perfectly executed operation. The cleaner's work, it seemed, wasn't quite finished. That evening, as Dominic entered his home, the same house Natalie had once shared but now emptied of all traces of her presence, he reviewed mental files he hadn't accessed in years. Memories of a young boy who had once idolized him before his mother poisoned him against his father. A son who had rejected every attempt at reconciliation, returning letters unopened and refusing phone calls. Now that son had appeared in Boston, potentially undermining everything Dominic had built. Some messes, it seemed, required special attention to truly disappear, even when that mess was your own flesh and blood. Dominic poured himself a rare glass of whiskey and contemplated the final stage of his cleanup operation, one that would test even his unwavering commitment to eliminating every trace of betrayal. Chapter 9. Legacy of the Cleaner. Michael Russo bore a striking resemblance to his father, the same sharp jawline and penetrating gray eyes, though his expression carried a perpetual defiance that was distinctly his own. At 27, he had established himself as a successful criminal defense attorney in Chicago, known for taking on difficult cases and impossible clients. He sat in Dominic's home office, tension radiating from his rigid posture as he faced the father he hadn't seen in years. Neither had embraced when Dominic opened the door, their greeting limited to stiff nods and formal words. You could have called first, Dominic remarked, taking a seat across from his son. Would you have agreed to see me? Michael countered. Yes. The simple answer seemed to catch Michael off guard. He regrouped quickly. I received a letter from Natalie. She claims you fabricated evidence against her, used your military connections to frame her. Dominic's expression remained neutral. And you believed her? I don't know what to believe, Michael admitted. I haven't seen you in 8 years. The father I remember wouldn't destroy someone's life out of vengeance. The father you remember is the version your mother created for you. Dominic replied evenly. A fiction designed to justify her own choices. Michael flinched slightly. I'm not here to rehash ancient history. Aren't you? Dominic leaned forward. Your mother left me for her psychiatrist, then told you I was dangerous and unstable. You were 7 years old, too young to question her narrative. By the time you were old enough to make your own judgments, you'd already decided who I was. This isn't about Mom, Michael insisted. It's always been about your mother, Dominic contradicted. Every rejected birthday gift, every unanswered letter, every graduation I wasn't invited to. All because you accepted her version of me without question. That's not fair, Michael objected, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Life rarely is, Dominic acknowledged. But justice can be, when properly administered. Is that what you did to Natalie? Administered justice. Dominic regarded his son thoughtfully. What would you consider justice for a wife who betrays her husband's trust? Who mocks his work to colleagues? Who steals corporate secrets and sells them to competitors? Who attempts to contact foreign agents to reveal classified information? If those allegations are true, they are, Dominic interrupted. Every charge against Natalie is supported by irrefutable evidence, which is why her case will never reach trial. She'll accept a plea because her guilt is absolute and documented. Michael studied his father's face, searching for deception. The Dominic Russo I've read about in the papers these past months seems more like a calculated vigilante than a corporate executive. More like the man your mother always claimed I was. Dominic finished for him. Yes. Dominic stood and moved to a built-in bookcase, pressing his palm against a hidden sensor. A panel slid open, revealing a safe. He entered a complex combination and removed a thick file. This contains everything, he said, placing the file before Michael. Every communication between Natalie and Brad Sullivan. Every transfer to offshore accounts. Every meeting with North Star executives. And her recorded conversations with someone she believed represented the Zubkov syndicate, offering classified information in exchange for help against me. Michael hesitated before opening the file. As a defense attorney, he recognized the weight of what he was about to review. Evidence that would either confirm his father's claims or reveal a devastating frame-up. For the next hour, he read in complete silence, his professional training allowing him to assess the documentation with clinical detachment despite the personal connection. When he finally looked up, his expression had hardened. This is comprehensive, he admitted reluctantly. If authentic, it would be impossible to refute in court. It's authentic, Dominic assured him, which is why the prosecutors are confident and her attorneys are desperate. Michael closed the file, conflict evident in his features. Even if everything here is true, the systematic way you destroyed her life seems excessive. Personal. It was both, Dominic acknowledged without apology. Betrayal deserves consequences. Is that what happened with Mom? She betrayed you, so she deserved consequences. Dominic's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Your mother made her choice. I never pursued any action against her, despite her efforts to alienate my only son from me. She was protecting me, Michael insisted, though with less conviction than before. She was punishing me, Dominic corrected, and using you as her instrument. The painful truth hung between them, neither man willing to retreat from his position. Finally, Michael stood. I need to think about all this. Review the evidence more carefully. Take the file, Dominic offered. Consider it from your professional perspective, not just as her stepson or my son. Michael gathered the documents. Why are you sharing this with me? You could have refused to see me, had me removed from your property, denied everything. Dominic met his son's gaze directly. Because despite everything, you're my son. And because after 20 years of believing your mother's lies about me, you deserve the opportunity to recognize the truth for yourself. As Michael moved toward the door, he paused. One more question. If I had sided with Natalie, tried to help her fight these charges, What would you have done? The question hung in the air, charged with implication. You're my son, Dominic repeated simply. That has always meant something to me, even if it stopped meaning anything to you. It wasn't quite an answer, but something in his father's tone sent a chill through Michael nevertheless. After his son departed, Dominic contacted Maddox. Michael has the file. Monitor his activities, but maintain distance. You think he'll let it go? Maddox questioned. He's a defense attorney with a prosecutor's mind, Dominic replied. He'll examine the evidence objectively before deciding his next move. And if he doesn't? If he tries to help Natalie anyway? Dominic gazed out the window at the gathering darkness. He won't. 3 days later, Dominic was reviewing security protocols in his Blue Star office when Michael arrived unannounced, looking haggard and conflicted. I spoke with the federal prosecutor, he said without preamble. Reviewed the case files. Consulted with experts in digital forensics. He placed the borrowed file on Dominic's desk. Everything checks out. Every piece of evidence is authentic. Dominic nodded, having expected nothing less. I also visited Natalie in detention, Michael continued. Confronted her with what I'd learned. His expression hardened. She tried to manipulate me, even when faced with irrefutable proof. Suggested we could work together to bring you down anyway. And what did you tell her? That I'm not a pawn in whatever game she's playing. Michael's jaw tightened. She betrayed you completely. Used your marriage as cover while she stole from your company and slept with another man. Then tried to commit treason when cornered. Dominic studied his son's face, recognizing his own uncompromising judgment reflected there. Justice has many forms, Michael. Some more permanent than others. I'm beginning to understand that, Michael acknowledged. And to understand you, perhaps. He didn't offer an apology for the years of estrangement, and Dominic didn't expect one. Some breaches couldn't be repaired with mere words. What happens now? Dominic asked. I returned to Chicago, Michael replied. Continue my practice. And perhaps, he hesitated, perhaps visit Boston occasionally, if that would be acceptable. It was the closest thing to reconciliation either man could offer, a tentative bridge across decades of absence and misconception. My door is always open to you, Dominic said simply. It always has been. After Michael left, Dominic received a call from General Reynolds. Have you considered my offer? Dominic thought about the overseas operation the general had mentioned, another mission, another chance to apply his particular skills in a different arena. He thought about the COO position at Blue Star, with its prestige and influence. And he thought about his son, the possibility of rebuilding what had been lost. I have, Dominic replied, and I've made my decision. 6 months later, Natalie Russo sat in a federal courtroom as her final sentencing was announced. 30 years with no possibility of parole for industrial espionage, conspiracy, and attempted treason. Brad Sullivan was already serving his 18-year sentence in a maximum security facility. Martin Reynolds had begun his 12-year term at a different federal prison. The Blue Star scandal had largely faded from the headlines, replaced by newer corporate dramas and political controversies. The company's stock had recovered under new leadership, with Carson Phillips announcing his retirement and the board appointing his successor. Not Dominic Russo, he had declined the COO position, instead recommending Alexandra Sullivan for the role. Her medical background and analytical mind had proven invaluable during the company's recovery, and the board had ultimately agreed with his assessment. Dominic himself had returned to what he did best. Russo Elite Cleaning Services had expanded into a full-scale security and intelligence firm, now openly providing services to corporate clients, government agencies, and private individuals with sensitive needs. He maintained a careful relationship with Michael, their monthly dinners gradually becoming less strained as they cautiously rebuilt a connection neither had thought possible. The past couldn't be erased, but a different future could still be constructed from its ruins. On a crisp autumn evening, Dominic stood on the balcony of his new penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor, General Reynolds at his side, as they discussed the successful conclusion of a classified operation in Eastern Europe. You could have taken that corporate position, the general noted. Settled into a comfortable executive life. That was never who I was, Dominic replied. I'm a cleaner. I remove problems, restore order, eliminate threats. And those who betray you? A cold smile touched Dominic's lips. They no longer exist. As night fell over the city, Dominic Russo surveyed the world he had created through unwavering resolve and uncompromising justice. He had been underestimated, disrespected, betrayed, and he had systematically destroyed everyone responsible, rebuilding his life with meticulous precision. The man who just cleaned houses had proven himself the most dangerous kind of adversary, one with patience, intelligence, and absolute conviction. One who never forgave betrayal and never left traces behind. One who ensured that every mess, no matter how complicated, eventually disappeared completely. The cleaner had completed his work, and his ledger was finally, perfectly, clean. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.